All right, excellent. So we're going to get started. This is the Experts Unplugged Office 365 compliance session. Hopefully you came in with lots and lots of questions. I'm going to ask you guys to, when you have questions, step up to the mics. All the floor mics will be on and off, but the guys in the back there will turn them on. We're here to answer all your questions. Hopefully we can answer and take the feedback back to Redmond, as well as kind of explore any new feedback, any new suggestions you guys have. We're going to start with the four of us with introductions. There's a couple other Microsofties through the audience. All right, there we go. So Kamal, why don't you take us away?
Sure. So I'm Kamal Janardhan. I'm the Group Program Manager, Group Program Manager Information Protection, and the areas I'm excited to talk about anything compliance, but archiving for Office 365, e-discovery, our recent acquisition, Equivio, auditing, so how we expose every single action in the service to you, device protection, how when data goes down to devices, how do you keep yourself safe, and the Compliance Center, the face of our compliance capabilities.
Sean Vinay. So I'm the compliance architect for Office 365, which is an overly important sounding title for the poor guy that gets to read thousands of pages of regulations and try to make sense of those in a way that we can pass it on to engineering in a way that won't put them to sleep.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Livon Esibov. I'm a Group Program Manager responsible for Exchange Online Protection that does email filtering for your mailboxes in the cloud and on-premise. And one fun fact I just realized is that among four of us, we have 60 years of experience at Microsoft.
Okay, I don't know how to follow that. So my name is Asaf Kashi. I'm another one of the Group Program Managers. They give these titles to anybody, so it's not very impressive. And my team specifically owns things like the mail flow transport, so in Exchange Online, Exchange On-Prem. The interesting fact there is the transport rules, and anything you do in transport rules ends up kind of going through functionality that my team builds. We also are responsible for encryption, customer-facing encryption features in the server and the service products for Office 365, so RMS, IRM, OME, any other acronyms you guys can come up with. And then DLP is also part of my team. So any questions around those areas, I'll be happy to answer and take feedback on. So with that, I think we're going to kick off questions. So feel free. Who's going to be the first one? There we go.
So I've been to a few sessions. This is kind of a new area for me. I'm with Conway. My name's Chris Nelson. It's a big company. We have a lot of compliance officers. We have lawyers. In general, our organization is pretty unaware of all these tools. How do we get started, and what should be the role of IT in this? Because I'm almost scared to show them this stuff because it's going to be so much work for me. How should our role balance with their role in this?
Typically what you want to make sure is you're getting ready to move to the cloud, have representation from your business department, your legal department, your IT engineering department, your operations department. Make sure each of them are represented. What will happen, what will slow down your migrations is when your departments are not equally represented, somebody comes in late, you have a completely new ramp cycle to bring them up. Yes, it is a lot of investment to get them all taught, teach them all at the same time. We can help our field personnel, have a lot of materials to help to bring your legal people up to speed, what our contracts offer and everything else. So we can actually help you get that group up to speed quickly. What we find when somebody was left out, it really derails that process, right? Because you've got now your company has different organizations wanting to go at different speeds.
The other thing I want to mention, on the title slide I threw up there, trust.office365.com. That's a great place to start. It links to all of our short videos in case you need to sell somebody on the importance or the capabilities of Office 365. It's got case studies. Maybe some of the case studies are from your industry. Maybe they're not. It's got guidance, both high level and very deep white papers. So that's usually a great place to get started while you're engaging with your account manager, your field, the TSPs, etc., and so forth. And for that, by the way, first question, you get a T-shirt. Look at that. We just have a few T-shirts here. You can also get more of them in the booth in the expo hall. Okay, so there you go. flip a coin. All right.
I got a couple of questions about auditing. I'm more interested in Exchange online auditing, but I'd like to hear the answer about any of the systems. A new thing showed up in PowerShell. I just noticed it when I came to the conference, which was the unified auditing. And I'm curious about the functionality of that. There isn't a scrap of documentation anywhere.
We actually just announced this at Ignite, so there should be documentations and blog posts up. We'll make sure that you have access to them. It's kind of a pretty big deal, what we've been working on for almost 2 years now. And so what the auditing that we announced at Ignite is we built a pipeline for Office 365 and added events across Exchange, SharePoint, Link, et cetera, this corpus of workloads we own, and we're going to be adding additional workloads. The pipeline is to gather the data, put it in an immutable store, and provide an experience on it, which we demoed at various places through the conference, as well as an API that allows you to access all of that content. Now to answer, oh, that was your, okay, great, it's an API. So now to kind of be specific about what it covers user actions on mailboxes, admin actions anywhere in the service, and most importantly, Microsoft DC admin actions. So anything we do to your data, we capture it all in this pipeline. And the reason we've actually made the API available is we've got about 100 plus partners signed up and about a dozen actually having built solutions on it right now that you can go out and take a look at. And our goal is, here, we're going to build you an experience that will hold this data and give you a source, but at the same time, we want that ecosystem of specific experiences that may be for verticals like financial or healthcare that you can go off and build yourself, or for SIEM providers. Take the data and do with it as you will because it's your data, right? You own it. So, does that?
Yeah, could I talk to you after the presentation about the admin APIs and access to that program? Is that
Absolutely. In fact, it's called I'll just give it to you right off the bat. If you do a search for Office 365 Activity API, right? Office 365 Management API, Office 365 Activity, you'll get to a web page, but absolutely you can talk to us, or I think we've got some people from our team here as well who've worked on this, so we'll be glad to. Oh, there she is. Hands up, Katie, who's kind of worked on this. She's one of the program managers who's worked on it, so thank you. Yes, and there is a session tomorrow morning that I actually suggest you attend. We're going to have a slide which has all the sessions, which actually she's presenting, talking about 10:45. So definitely go to us and give us your feedback. Thank you.
So my question is, my organization is very interested in the DLP component where when a document is written or an Excel spreadsheet is written that has credit card, social security number, or patient information, then immediately gets flagged. I don't know if this is a question or if it's just a straight DLP question, but admins are immediately notified upon the file being posted so that the admin gets a little email in his inbox saying, somebody's going to come to your desk whining in a couple moments, and here's why. So I guess the yes is kind of what I'm looking for there.
Okay. So yeah, we've got two ways to do this, and we actually they support both of the scenarios, as I understand your question. So from a DLP perspective, we have the concept of GIR, which is Generate Incident Report, which is a real-time piece of email that allows you to say, I'm going to direct the fact that this rule hit, or this policy was matched, or this sensitive content was detected, and I'm going to send that notification to an admin, an incident management group, a DL, whoever you want to send it to, maybe even a third-party ticketing system, which we actually demoed with Dynamic CRM, but you could use any ticketing system that can accept an email. You can configure on a per-rule basis, per rule, per policy, what data is in that email. So whether that email is just metadata, meaning this hit, this was the confidence, this is what we found, or actually include all the actual sensitive information in it. So you can include everything in it if that's what you want to do. That's our real-time notification mechanism, and that happens literally, it's instantaneously. As soon as the system detects it, it fires it, and it can also remediate immediately or just notify immediately. On the other end, the part of the auditing, everything that happens, all the hits are also logged. Now, today, the DLP audits are going into the way we did auditing previously. They're not in the activity feed yet, but that is something that we're actively working on and will land it over the coming quarters. Does that answer your question there? Okay. Cool. There's one in the back there.
What's your take on journaling for compliance?
Love that. What's my take on journaling? Yeah, thank you for the question. So journaling, for other folks in the audience, is a mechanism to take data out of Office 365, so essentially any part of the transport infrastructure that we have. So if a mail is sent to transport, you can actually send a copy of it to another location. And the scenario that it's usually associated with is archiving. So you want to make sure that a copy, the good things about journaling are that you capture all the information in flight. Some of the cons and the concerns with it are it doesn't capture appointments or tasks or anything that doesn't go through the journaling system. And most importantly, it doesn't capture information before you turned on journaling. So it's got some gap. So when we were looking at Office 365 archiving, we weighed the various ways we could build that. And the archiving system in Office 365 is in place. That means everything that's in your mailbox, your OneDrive, your SharePoint, you can set immutability on it, and that immutable store kind of effectively allows you to have the archive in place in the context of the workload. The one reason why we still used to have people interested in journaling was BCC and DL information. And this is when I send a mail out to, say, my entire organization, and I BCC my team, because I don't want them to reply all and essentially create the storm of email. I just want to ensure that it goes to a small set, or I don't want everyone else to know who the mail is going to. About a year ago, we actually shipped the capability where we capture BCC and DL information within the in-place archive. So anytime a mail is sent with BCC, we capture the full set of recipients it went to in the immutable store in Exchange. So today, really, our recommendation is use Office 365 archiving. There is no reason to use journaling as the mechanism. However, if you still want to take the data out of Office 365 and you have kind of reasons for doing so, we support the capability.
Okay.
Does that help? Cool.
Yeah, one additional question, sorry. So when you talk about immutability, which means you really need to put the entire archive mailbox on a worm policy, that's something that you guys are going to be launching soon?
Well, that's a good question. So the question was, how do we enable immutability? Is it with a worm policy? And so when SEC 17A-4 was originally kind of created, this was you must as an organization be able to guarantee that your content can't be edited or changed. The original notion of it was worm, meaning you had to put it in a hard drive that had write once, read many, right? And once you wrote it, you couldn't change it. What's happened in the last 5 or 10 years is the regulations have actually shifted away from hardware-based immutability, which is worm, to software-based immutability. And the reason it was originally hardware-based immutability is because those were the vendors talking to the SEC at the time. And now we've had a bunch of us, a consortium of vendors, that's Microsoft, Google, Symantec, all these companies that do software-based immutability. And because of that addendum, there's been an addendum to the SEC that says immutability can be either by a setting in the service, or you could use worm still, and it gives you the same guarantees of ensuring that no data is lost. So when we turn on immutability, it's actually something in the database that ensures any change to it. Right. Okay, yeah. So whether it's by an admin or an end user, any action delegated on the service is automatically captured in the immutable store. So.
Okay. All right, thanks.
So there was a question in the front and in the back, or back and front? Okay.
Yeah, I've got a couple, so I'll just do one, and we can kind of rotate, I guess. I'm concerned about Office365.gov. One of the things that would help moving is if you had a classification capability for controlled, unclassified information. So I could mark emails as law enforcement sensitive, PII, HIPAA, those kind of categories. Has anybody surfaced that requirement to you yet? Is that something that could be done?
You can do that today in the GovCloud. So I'll pick on law enforcement first. If you have criminal justice information, we support that standard. The data tagging is available in the product based on whatever classification scheme the tenant uses. If you need to show that those requirements for tagging it can then be supported in the service, we can help get you the right documentation to show that. What controls that we adhere to. We've already signed 11 states under CJIS. So we help the law enforcement agencies at the state level be able to demonstrate to all of the agencies within the scope of their state how that works. We found it easier under law enforcement to scale that way than to try to do that with every law enforcement agency across the country. So 54 states and territories is much more manageable for us to deal with from a compliance perspective than every agency uniquely or individually. Under the Department of Defense, under the recently published SRG, we have level 2. We're looking at the level 4 for the CUI, for the multi-tenancy, and level 5 will be the target for the dedicated environment. So yes, you'll be able to use those markings from a DoD perspective or from a criminal justice perspective. The product enables you to do that for the objects that you create. You need to be able to back that up by demonstrating what standards have been applied, and we have the artifacts to help you do that.
My question is related to rights management services and Exchange. If you configure Exchange to use rights management services and a user wants to read an email with an active sync protocol, then the client access server decrypts the message and sends the message unencrypted to the active sync device. When do you try to change it?
So you can choose to turn that off and not send a decrypted message down to the device, but ActiveSync is not going to support IRM built in as a capability. It's trying to change ActiveSync and EAS is basically like pushing water up the hill. That's,
so what do you propose to do instead? So the
richer,
proposal is not to use ActiveSync with RMS?
The proposal is to not enable it with RMS if you're concerned about that. The proposal is also to use the richer clients that either are today supporting it or will in the rest of this year and maybe the beginning of next year will support it across all platforms. So we are working to enable IRM functionality across all platforms.
Okay, thanks.
Open mic, good. Hi, I am a delivery manager out of DC. So as you can imagine, we have a lot of government clients. We also have a lot of private sector clients, but we also have this sort of hybrid in between where they need heavy regulation and compliance, but they're not quite government. And I wanted to know if you guys could talk a little bit about some of the other flavors that might suit that. I heard of, I think it's ITAR as something, as one option, and then there's something like, to give you a sense, like nuclear energy companies, utility companies that don't fall into the government side, but still need all U.S. resources to have hands on the data, at the very widest boundary.
So the way that the rules were written, that the government approved for inclusion into the government cloud, were pretty specific. Now we can approve certain exceptions, so it really depends on the profile. So it depends really on two factors, both the profile of what the company does for the government, the sensitivity of the data that they hold, as well as their business profile. If you do extremely sensitive information, you have 100 users, it's not going to make a lot of sense for you to sign up for ITAR. So what I help, I've gone to a couple of nuclear energy companies, other critical infrastructure. There are ways that they can use multi-tenant environment and meet the requirements, NERC, FERC, 853, et cetera. So we can help with that. There are specific responsibilities that the tenant will take on that they need to use in terms of protecting the classified data or the control data a specific way. Now, those requirements already exist in their current on-prem solutions. They're not supposed to allow, for example, data from the control system to get into the business system. So all they're doing, you have to show them how to extend that into the cloud solution. So using IRM or DLP or other technologies like this, and they can still meet those requirements.
Okay, and what's the best follow-up resource to take some of this back to our business development team?
Stand up, some of you guys. Yeah.
Person.
Pick on him right there.
All right, so you're just going to get on the plane with me when we go back? We'll go talk about this? Great, thanks.
So the next question has to do with SharePoint. So I want to keep close tabs on it. I want to be able to do analytics on it. There are a number of vendors that have offerings. Is it possible to load those in the Office 365 environment, or do I have to load those in Azure.gov and move data back and forth so that I have access to the analytics and the results?
That's a great question. So a couple of things. I think first of all was analytics within SharePoint. So every time I say that's a great question, so that's right. When we recently acquired a company, I think we've been talking to them for 2 years, but in January this year we welcomed Equivio to the Microsoft family, and they are an analytics company. That's in Israel. And effectively what they do is take large corpus of data and give you the ability to create themes on it. So data goes from being a room full of shadows and figures to, look, half the people in this room are 10 years old, the other half are 20, etc. So essentially giving you shapes in it. Now, today, when you actually want to do analytics within SharePoint, your option is to take the data out and is to have to, and yes, we recommend Azure as the place. You can take the data out of Exchange, put it in Azure, take the data out of SharePoint, put it in Azure, and run analytics on it. This is not the long-term direction, right? And really, the mechanisms to take the data out, you can't take out a lot of it. The tool we give you today is you could do an e-discovery query across this entire corpus of environment, winnow it down to what you actually want to analyze. So for example, you have a rough idea that it's everything associated with a particular keyword, but these are rudimentary and rough tools. In the future, what we want to allow you to do, and we're really announcing the preview of that today, we announced it at Ignite, which is the ability to part of the e-discovery process, do analysis, and then have Equivio run that analysis within the Microsoft environment. So you don't think about the data flowing out or not. We've actually made it part of the workflow. And so if you'd like to sign up, if you're an Office 365 customer, you can be part of that preview in the end of May. So please do sign up for that. And the workflow there is that you do a search, and then you say, I want to analyze. And so be it with Exchange or with SharePoint, you're now able to do these creation of themes and pivot tables and essentially get notions of what are the insights available in that data. And then what you can export is a much smaller sliver of it. So that's one. The second thing is we are looking, and we haven't yet finalized, on how we can add partners into this workflow. We don't want to do it based on export, because then the partners have to run the data, there are multiple copies of the data, it gets fragmented, it's just divergence. So that's something that we're working on, and we're actually, part of this partner preview is actually we're looking for partners to come and tell us, hey, you know what, I'd like to do analysis this way, and this is how I'd like to insert myself. And so that's also something that we are talking about. But if you're interested in the preview, please sign up.
Thanks.
So I actually have a question for you. Are you analyzing the data? Are you analyzing audits? What exactly are you analyzing?
The data and user behavior.
Data and user behavior. Okay. So like social engineering type?
Moving large quantities of data, looking at files outside your area of expertise.
So anomalies?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because I think in addition to what Kamal was saying, her team and a few other teams have built this, the managed API specifically for activity feeds and those kinds of events. And we do have, a dozen partners that are building a solution currently and have started demoing some of these things where they can use this API specifically to analyze that kind of basically social activity or anomalous activity without having to pull the data out. Pulling the data out is a physics problem that is just going to get harder and harder. If any of you watched Julia's keynote at the beginning of the week, I think one of the infographics was 44 zettabytes of data in the next 4 years or 5 years from now. Basically, with the data amount that we have today for a 100,000 seat company, it's already impossible to pull the data out fast enough. There's no pipe big enough to pull the data fast enough to do any kind of searching or anything off-site and analysis before enough of the data has changed that you have to do it again. So it's basically like a 5-week process. If your data if you're willing to go stale for multiple weeks, then you can do that. But as the data grows, it's just a physics problem that doesn't work. So the model has been for us to surface as much of the, almost like a first derivative of the data and the audits, so they can do their richer analysis, but they're doing it on the signals that they're expecting. So that's where we work with partners and providing them the signals. So if you have a particular partner, we have about 100 that have signed up already, or even over 100 that signed up, and about a dozen or so that have already announced and started talking about what kind of products they have. It would be great for you and the partner to come in and say, hey, here's the product that I'm looking for, or talk to them and see if they've already signed up for this.
Okay, thanks.
I think there's a question back there and then back here.
Hi, I'm working in a Japanese-based company headquartered in Japan, but it's a global company, and then like thousands subsidiaries all over the world, and then we are very slow to move. Now it's start thinking to move to Office 365. I talked to Levon on the floor a little bit about those how we can move those global company in probably one tenant is the best scenario, but there is a regulation in Europe, and then I heard something about go local strategy to have a local data center in each country, but also I heard someone else that the Office 365 service is exempt for the European data storage, something regulation since last summer or something. So if you have some more data or information, how we can move easily to the Office 365 services.
So our field personnel have begun working with global companies to help construct the deal in a way that enables you, if you have a Europe division, Asian division, North American division, that you can structure that in a way that we can keep your regional data within region for that segment, right, of your company. It's a different approach to how we set you up as a tenant, though. So you have to work with us, and we figure out a way to craft that, because if you sign up as a single entity in North America, for example, the service would be blind expecting you to be in North America. And the commitments, the contracts, everything else are typically based off of then where you sign up from. So we've had customers that we've started working with where you can compartmentalize the customer and be able to meet those regulatory requirements for data sovereignty in Europe, right? And the safe harbor issue, it's nice that there's a reciprocity recognition in that, but really it's actually easier for us if we just keep the European data in Europe, right? Just think of it purely from a selfish perspective. The performance for the European tenant is much better. We don't want the European tenant to have data in North America or in Asia, because that's just going to make performance and increase your latency issues. Yes. Yeah. And did you have another part of your question that I didn't get? That was pretty much the question, right? Oh, yeah, our global strategy is to get everywhere that we can as fast as possible. Yeah, pretty much that's it. So I just think, humorous side, from a scale perspective, the more tenancy we have, the quicker that we grow. So you see we have data centers growing around the world now. You can look on the Trust Center and see the maps of where we have data centers. And as we are able to stand those up in more regions, it just enables us to keep data within the region, right? Which satisfies both the local regulators and latency and operations issues.
And just to build on that, we put the money where our mouth is, and in the last few months, we launched the local presence through Go Local in Australia and in Japan.
This question is about multi-mailbox search and exchange. Let's assume you work for a large company with locations in America and Europe, and currently with rollback success control, you can limit that somebody in Europe can only search in mailboxes in Europe, and you can also control that somebody in NAFTA can only, or let's say the legal department in NAFTA can only search mailboxes in America. But what is currently the case that everybody who has the right to make a multi-mailbox search has also the right to see all the other defined searches which have been executed previously, which is a huge security issue for large companies. Do you plan to change that?
Yep, no, that's a good question. So I think we announced more scoped permissioning for our searches at Ignite, and I think there are a couple of things I'll just repeat that we can do today, which is the ability to scope it down to only a set of users, right? And more interestingly, what we also announced is the ability to scope it down only to a certain set of dates. So
the question was not...
I got it. I'll finish my thought. No, totally. So I think today that's what you can do in the service. I think your question, which was, I have the ability to run a certain X set of searches. I don't want the other person in the eDiscovery Center to be able to actually see those searches, right? And so that is something we're working on. It's actually part of related to some of the scale unit and the scoping work. It's kind of the trend. It isn't in there today, but it's very much on our radar, and we get the sauce clot. So.
There's a concept, before we go there, there's a concept of administrative units that we're kind of looking across all of the Office 365 workloads. And how does that apply to permissions? How does that apply to delegated admins? How does it apply to the compliance center, et cetera? So that will permeate the service over the course of the year and beyond. It might take longer in some areas than others, but that's kind of the concept of my company is large enough and we actually want to separate these things, and not by hierarchical kind of containership, but basically side by side, because we're a collection of things. So that the concept is there. There's a lot of work and design going on, but we don't have a specific, like, here's the day that you're going to get this. But as it comes online, we'll start previewing in different areas and soliciting feedback. So being a part of the, the what's the first program?
The first release.
First release
program.
Yeah,
first release will actually get you there quicker. And I think you've already seen some of this stuff in Exchange. You'll start seeing as SharePoint builds its own dependency on Azure scale units. It'll come in there, OneDrive, etc. But yeah, no, we hear you. It's an ask we get. We're on it. In fact, Quentin, do you mind putting your hand up? He's the e-discovery lead PM who's been working on this.
So I work in the SharePoint arena. And the biggest challenge that we're running into, at least moving data into the cloud, specifically in Office 365, is from a compliance and regulatory perspective. I'm in the insurance industry, and we do handle quite a bit of work with the federal government and state government as well. And the biggest challenge we have is getting our legal and compliance department to come on board and to basically understand that this is something that is somewhat safe and getting better as it goes along. How do I go about getting them to come on board with that?
Yeah, so I think there are two pieces of that, and I'll answer one piece of it, and then the trust of actually getting into the cloud, I'm going to hand it to Sean. So one of the things is, so what's the fastest way to get data into the service? The first challenge we present is, how do you even get it there? Does anyone know? Yes, thank you. It's still FedEx, right? Still, you ship a drive, fastest way to get it to the service. So we announced the ability to ship PSTs into the service. Very soon you'll be able to do drive shipping with OneDrive content and SharePoint content, and it'll be tied to a given user. The important piece of that when you think of your legal and compliance department is it's with a chain of custody. So on the drive, you generate a key that protects that content. You can't actually upload it into the service because you use that same key to ensure that the content is moved from Azure into OneDrive, SharePoint, or Exchange. So that chain of custody is important, particularly for legal departments to say, I have this whole kind of wealth of data, how do I get it in there? Now there's all their fears about actually just moving into the service, which...
So the second part, make sure that you compartmentalize the types of data that you'd be working with, because what you should be able to show your different departments is what requirements have been met by the service provider. So if you have state and local government data, you're going to have healthcare, you're going to have comptroller data, you're going to have criminal justice data. So you're looking for the equivalent standards that we offer. Do they meet CJIS? Do they meet IRS 1075? Can you get a HIPAA BAA? Do they do high trust? And by being able to demonstrate those things, when was the last audit, what was the audit report, you can have your legal, your compliance team see those things and go, oh, for that collection of data, these requirements have been met, and then back to the processes, there will be a chain of custody that will be able to prove, positive burden of proof and be defensible. That really, really helps those people. Because I don't know anybody in that field who's not risk averse. So as soon as you talk about letting that data go somewhere, they're going to put up a red flag until they can sleep at night. And that's how you help them sleep. Right? Have them show how those standards are met. Have them show there is a secure way to get the data there. It's a lot harder now to argue what's left. Right? Why wouldn't we do it now?
So I'm in the camp that the data is a lot more secure in Office 365 than it is on-premise. But of course, as you just mentioned, there's a lot of people who still think it should be on-premise, or there may be, I guess, legal reasons why it has to be on-premise. I've been to a lot of sessions on the hybrid scenarios coming up. Are there going to be more hybrid options that allow us to say, and this is about SharePoint, to be able to easily store content either, on-premise and in the cloud, and just be able to switch back and forth, seamlessly without having to do a lot of custom development to build that kind of capability?
Yeah, so I think that this is, it's kind of an interesting point because we've had hybrid in Exchange for a while, and really one of the big tenets of the next on-prem release of SharePoint, if you saw any sessions, then you probably have seen them talk about this, is about how they're going to develop solutions for cloud connected. So an example, and I'll use a specific feature, is previously, when you had your site in SharePoint or a tenant, all your users had to be in the cloud or on premises. You didn't really get to choose between. Now what they actually are giving you the ability is some users may well be in the cloud, and you could have sites for those users in the cloud, another set of users, either because if it's a department that's migrating later or it's a steady state, needs to stay on premises, you can have sites there on premises. Now, what does that mean for compliance capabilities? A couple of examples. Yeah, okay, so I think the SharePoint investing in that is a pretty big. E-discovery. Previously, you had to do these completely separately. The SharePoint team is investing in the ability so that when we do a search, you'll actually be able to say, these are my on-premise searches, this is my data, and not have to have a completely separate console. We'll be able to do that. Auditing. If you're pure on-premises, you'll get a certain level of auditing, but if you're cloud connected and hybrid, you'll be able to get the full capabilities of the compliance center because we will take that audit data and put it in the cloud. DLP has similar capabilities where essentially if you're connected to the cloud, you get the full plethora, being able to do the search and the policies. And so this is a shift you see that we've already made a jump with Exchange, and it's on the roadmap with SharePoint, the next on-premises version.
So the third question has to do with service operations. So about 2 hours ago, there was a presentation where they talked about exposing some APIs on Office 365 on the commercial side, so that those APIs could be consumed, so you could monitor service operations. And there was even a vendor there that could pull up some network information, both internal and the transit piece, so you could try to identify where the actual issue was with the customer experience. But they said that those APIs have not been turned on in the .gov version of 365, and they didn't know when they would be. Is there a compliance reason why that is true?
I think I know what you're talking about. So I want to separate two things. The APIs that we've been talking about for logging and working with the software integrators and the partners, yes, that's moving and everything. We haven't released that for government consumption because under government you have a different program, right? You have TIC from DHS. So we've been working and partnering with them as industry. We also work with Google and Salesforce and Amazon to try to help refine those requirements to be more meaningful for the cloud. So the controls under 853, under FedRAMP, we did some back and forth and we studied that, and they agreed that about 80% of the controls under the TIC program are actually met by what's already done under 853 moderate. So what becomes interesting, I want you guys to think of two levels really quick. Think of what happens in the cloud from the system level and then up at the app level. Before, under a TIC program, you were assessing all of the net flow data in the system level events to do correlation. When you move to the cloud, what value do you, as a service consumer, get from assessing or analyzing system level data? Right? None. Your users have no access to the system. So you're correlating against an environment that you don't have visibility into, and even patterns of events won't mean the same thing to you because the architecture is very different. So what we've done is to try to work with them to come up with what does the application level events and the user activities look like. How do you correlate that to the authentication actions that actually occur on your AD server? And so it's just a different way of getting the same capability, but going about the data gathering a bit different. So we'll continue to work with them on that. And as that API matures and we start getting more partners in that space, we'll also start leveraging that in the government space. So we're just not ready to do it yet for government. We need to finish baking what TIC is going to look like in the cloud, but before we end up figuring out how to then use that API and recommend to use it to satisfy those requirements.
All right, thanks.
So this is more of a kind of a silly practical question, but we have a lot of instances where personnel's USB drives are deactivated, for particular use of transferring files, documents, etc. And so in a similar fashion, or in comparison, if you're looking at OneDrive for Business or OneDrive and just the interaction with that, how do you explain or mitigate, or are there case studies and documentation and information that supports that the difference between those two scenarios and how you're compliant in the OneDrive world versus not so in the USB world? So.
Yeah, and let me kind of frame the question, make sure that I got what you were looking for. Today, the way that the file sharing world works is often with hard drives or USBs or just flash drives. And we're moving to a OneDrive world, right? Like with document collaboration. When I send an email, there should be a link in the OneDrive. And how does compliance in OneDrive work?
Right. And you know, there's that perception of OneDrive in the same boat as Google Drive or as Bucket.
It's a good question. This drive, like Dropbox. But it's, yes.
Yeah.
No, it's a good point. And so this is kind of to the heart of how, I mean, like 2.5 years ago, this team didn't exist. We were parts of the Exchange team, the OneDrive team, the SharePoint team. It was created because there was a need to have compliance within Office 365. And so one of the tenets of that is we work with, say, the OneDrive team that owns the consumer experience, and we become responsible for the compliance experience. So to translate that into a specific set of features, the way that you can do search, say in eDiscovery, in Exchange and SharePoint, OneDrive indices and OneDrive built-in search will also give you that capability. We're going to look at the way that you do data loss prevention. You ensure the data doesn't leave OneDrive, or when you want to share data between your personal and your public OneDrive, you control it. Auditing for OneDrive is available today. All the auditing I talked about includes OneDrive. And there's a difference between OneDrive for personal versus OneDrive for business. The OneDrive for business has all these protections, and what we do is we control the flow of data between business and personal to ensure that you're safe.
So are there case studies or especially in the financial industry, in the banking industry, is there a white paper or case study or particular clients that you have, large clients that we could tap into that say, okay, they've done it, you know, here's the blueprint, and here's the checklist of items.
That's actually a good point.
Hey, Shobit, put your hand up. All right, right in the front. Shobit. There. All right, so you want to get with him, and he's the marketing person for the compliance areas here. So he'll be able to hook you up, and we'll find out the specifics. Some companies are thrilled to do case studies. Some companies are thrilled to talk to us about them and not publish the fact that before their DLP system didn't work, but now their DLP system works. Or before they didn't look using the proper searches in eDiscovery, and now that they've got our stuff, they're using it, because it kind of tells a bad story of the past. So it's a very fine line that a lot of these companies are walking with the case studies. The other piece that Kamal was saying, not only do we control the flow, we actually have enabled features over time in OneDrive for Business. Specifically, like you couldn't actually sync RMS documents from SharePoint to OneDrive clients up until, I think, October, November last year. And now that's enabled. So you can actually say, hey, this particular piece of content, whether you do it manually or via policy, is restricted to company confidential. And at that point, I don't care if you're syncing it to your home computer because you signed in for OneDrive for Business, because you will have to auth and maybe multi-factor auth from home if you're going to access that document, because as soon as the document is opened, the policy is checked against it, etc. So you won't have data loss by encrypting it and having the policy travel with it. And at the same time, since you're using RMS, all of the other compliance functionality, all eDiscovery searches, etc., will work just fine, because you own the key for your tenant, and you're basically letting us use it to access the data and to do those searches. Or you're letting the system, not any particular human.
Yeah, and I think part of the device protection, kind of the data loss, it applies even to devices. So we announced the built-in device protection, MDM for Office 365, and the full Intune capabilities that you saw Brad demo at the keynote. OneDrive is one of the apps that's protected. And so your personal data, no problem. You can do selective wipe. Your personal pictures in your OneDrive, nobody touches them. Your work documents, yeah, okay, you're no longer an employee, you don't have access to those anymore. So that sort of built-in pervasive compliance applies to OneDrive as it does to Exchange and SharePoint, and it will apply to other workloads as well.
Thank you.
If nobody asks another question, then one about retention policies. It's possible to apply a default retention tag to a mailbox, and the retention tag will also be, let's say, operating on calendar entries and notes, but it's not visible to the user. What is your priority to change that?
So let me play back. You want to have a retention policy that isn't visible to the user? on calendars and
I
notes?
want that the retention policy is visible to all items where it's operating on. For example, calendar entries and notes, there is no visibility to the user.
I know, it's a good point. So we have, within Outlook and OA, you have a way to immediately look at a message and tell when it's going to be deleted, as defined by your admin. We don't have this for calendar and notes while we have it. So, so far, that's kind of been not a major customer request. If it's an important one, send us feedback and we'll work on it. In the new Universal Outlook, we actually have an opportunity to develop some of these capabilities much more quickly. So build this in. So thank you. I was kind of surprised I hadn't gotten a retention question yet. Thank you.
In a migration scenario, I have a journaling archive of 8 terabyte. How do you suggest that I move that to Office 365?
I love that you're asking me how to move it to Office 365. Excellent. How many people have archives they want to move to Office 365? That's great. Okay. So there are a couple of things. So one of the things, we are doing a partner preview. So we realize that moving data from homegrown devices and archives is just something that is specific and proprietary to each customer. So it's something we're relying on our partners to do. And what we're doing is building APIs to make it easier. So we have a set of partners who are right now specializing in rehydrating content. And they've really focused on Symantec and kind of the big players. So depending on what kind of archive you have.
Well, we're working with Quadratech.
Okay, cool. So I think that is and what we're giving our partners in return is APIs that they can actually apply metadata. So when the content comes into Office 365, it's either retained the policies that it had and is discoverable and it looks right and it appears. So it doesn't get the transformation, doesn't actually lose fidelity in the content. And that's really the solution. And I would say 2 years ago, nobody was asking us this question. Right now, we get this all the time. I have data, this expensive archive, I don't want to store it twice. How do I do it? So if you're looking for a partner, within about a month or so, we hope to kind of have a set of partners that we validated and verified.
So where would I store those 8 terabyte data?
So the way that the actual storage is, depending on the content type. If it's email, right, then it gets rehydrated into the email stores. And if it is an active user, then it would go into their active user mailbox. If it is an inactive user, it goes to an inactive mailbox. One of the features that we announced that makes it possible for us to even enable the rehydration and the reingestion is the archive that grows with you. And so this is as data flows into Office 365, previously you had to manually go and increase the size of the mailboxes. Now it will automatically, we will just chain mailboxes. And if you've got an E3 license, it's unlimited storage. It's just going to grow with it. And so and e-discovery is possible.
I have actually kind of a two-parter, but it revolves around the same thing, and it's PII. And I may have missed this earlier when you were talking about auditing. For example, if somebody has a spreadsheet of 5,000 names with Social Security numbers in there, obviously a violation of PII. That is total non-compliance if they're putting it up on a OneDrive because you have unauthorized personnel they may be sharing that with. How would you deal in that scenario?
Yeah, so actually I think there's a DLP policy that you can create, and there's an e-discovery query. So I'll let him answer the DLP question. And then
okay. Sure. So we can recognize any sensitive type, such as Social Security numbers or PII policies comprised of more than just specific sensitive types. And the DLP solution basically gives you the ability to discover the sensitive information wherever it might be. And we've had this in messaging for the last 2 years, meaning Exchange, Outlook, OA. And now we've previewed it in SharePoint and OneDrive and clients.
That goes to my next question. In SharePoint, so you have that ability as well in SharePoint?
Yes, so it's right now in a closed preview, meaning there's 100 plus tenants that have it enabled. We can enable more tenants, so if you're already on Office 365 or you want to try it, we can talk offline and get you into that program. And it will be a broad preview for all tenants, all E3 and above tenants come around June, so kind of the end of this quarter. And that functionality lights up wherever we do searching, wherever we do things. So e-discovery, you can do that in. If you want to do it manually, you can do it via policies in DLP. You can take different actions, and over time, those actions get richer. So that's kind of like the first half of the question, I think, right?
Right. Well, the second half was in SharePoint, where you're allowed in very restricted areas to have PII. However, you want to make sure that it's not available to that but infamous all authenticated users.
Yeah, no, totally. So we have one way that you can do this, and I think it's sort of there's a proactive action, and then there's tell me what's happening in my environment action. What Asaf walked through is kind of the proactive action. You're like, okay, I don't want content that looks like this to ever be available externally, but you know what, you're going to miss some things. So then the system uses the same search to make the decisions about the action. The second thing you do is you do a search query, which is possible today. I think in SharePoint today in eDiscovery Center, you can do a sensitive data search and say, tell me all the data in my environment that has sensitive data in it, right? Or tell me all the content that is viewable by external, right? You use that keyword. And I think Quentin actually demoed this in his eDiscovery session. So you can do these two searches. And what these two searches will retrieve all the content that falls under these criteria. What you can then do is have in your audit query, have any content that's associated, say, with that site. Or now you know where the data is located, you know what the file types are, or you know what the name of the file is. Do an audit search for all the actions taken on files that met that criteria. Now, you're going to go switch between these two, do an eDiscovery query, then do an audit log. We are working on taking that experience and making it seamless, right?
Okay.
But the building pieces exist.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Are we all go to the party early? Is that what folks want to go?
We were so much more energetic 2 hours ago, so believe me, we're so passionate about this stuff, but we're... Yes, exactly.
Come on, another good question.
Tony's got to have a question.
I have many questions. My life is full of questions. None of them are going to get answered here, I'm afraid.
Okay.
He has a question. There's one more. Well? Hold on, Tony.
Sorry.
1 second.
Sorry, Tony. Apologies.
1 second. Somebody jumped ahead of you.
Sorry, Tony.
Aww.
Sorry, Tony. You have the inside track. You know that. We always answer your questions.
No, I saw him stand up. That's why I stood up.
Sorry?
I saw him stand up. That's why I stood up.
Oh, wow.
No, I had a question. I don't know if it's relevant to this one, but if our current organization has nods in each of the countries that we have emails, now in your current environment, you recommend putting it where your main headquarters is and then pointing everybody. Are you going to do anything that has multi-locations so you can store the mailbox closer to the country so you have response, a faster response?
So let me just try to take this. So I think you're describing a scenario of a large multinational company that has a workforce around the globe, and they want to put the data or mailboxes in this particular example in the region of their employees. Did I understand this correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, there is understanding of this request, and there is an internal investigation on how to make it happen. So right now I'm not in a position to commit to a particular timeline, but there is an exploratory and implementation work that is going on right now. So.
Do you guys want to comment about the general compliance picture for Office 365 groups?
Great.
I thought it was a good question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So absolutely. So the question was about.
Do I want another T-shirt?
Yes. Compliance for Office 365 groups. I think in fact, we said this at all our sessions because we were sure Tony was there. Yeah, actually about a couple of, I think before Ignite, I had one of the PMs for the Modern Groups team in my office saying, so, Tony's been asking us about our Modern Groups compliance story. And I said, so we're actually working on it right now. So it is a requirement when we roll out Modern Groups to EDU to make sure that we actually have compliance built in. And really, we had compliance, the way that we architected Modern Groups about 3 or 4 months ago, compliance was kind of part of it because it was the mailbox architecture. We made a couple of changes in the way that the Active Directory user is associated with the group. So there's some additional work we have to do to make sure that we didn't lose that capability. So yes, it's in the works, coming very soon. And we will send a blog post accompanied with a quick one to Tony. So our Modern Groups PM can stop worrying.
I have a couple of questions about the MRM functionality. Is there any ability to track or report on the deletions that occur after they've occurred? And the second one is about the retention tags. Can you set event-based retention or a trigger date for a particular tag, something like that?
So I think, let me make sure I got the second question, which is, a particular date when all the tags get triggered? Is that what you...
Yeah, so if I have, I want to do retention on an employee leaving the company 7 years after they leave the company is the classic example.
Got it. No, thank you. So for more complex, so for the first question, the end user report, kind of like we had with Mailbox Manager, it's on our list. If it's pretty important, please do send us mail to help justify it. It's not something we have today. It's something, but part of our entire audit story is, one piece of it is to actually expose a report that is my stuff. So where did I log in? What did I do? And one of the things we want to include in that is which of your mails were deleted by the policy, because it's part of a compliance, your view. So, thank you for that. Apologies we don't have it today. But the second piece of it, which is so part of our new compliance center is also something called a unified policy, which is when you actually define actions to be taken in Office 365, we've actually based it on a new infrastructure that allows you to create a policy that is common to all the services and consistent. And one of the capabilities that this policy could give you is to actually chain them, to say, I want to do this policy, then based on this other criteria, I want to trigger another. So you could imagine, I want to share all this content out, then on this particular date, or when, say, X user leaves a company, I want to stop sharing and I want to delete. It's not a capability that exists today, but the first building block of it, that kind of unified framework, is in place. And you saw us kind of demo that with the Compliance Center. You should see the next iteration of that more complex policy, because it's a less common scenario. More of our advanced customers want to do it, and so that is in the radar there. Thank you.
Kamal, is it also in there for on-premise customers that don't use hybrid?
Great. How many people saw Vivek's session with Perry? Okay, well. So the question was about on-premises customers. So a lot of this capability is actually available on-premises, and the reason is the people who are lost to move to the cloud are highly compliant customers. And so certain things, like there's a version of DLP that is possible on-premises, like certainly all the exchange capabilities, auditing, will be available on premises. Our retention improvements. For Compliance Center is intended to be cross-Office 365, so if you're cloud connected, you get all of it. If you are pure Exchange, it doesn't make sense, because we got the feedback from you that we're not going to span those workloads. So you would get those retention capabilities, but they would be specific to a workload. Public folder hold and search, available on premises. The scoped searching, available on premises. Some of our e-discovery improvements, not all of them, available on premises. So we have a full list, kind of, I think, in one of the decks, but this is the one area where the answer is not we've forgotten on premises. We are doing some work for on premises. So.
And ones that are using SharePoint on-premise, Exchange on-premise, file service on-premise?
Yes, and if they use, so when the SharePoint on-premises release goes out, there are features we're putting in there, like document deletion policies, that is for pure on-premises customers. So we think of it as a good, better, best. We want to give you value for the next release of Exchange and the next release of Pure on-premises if you're one of those customers who hasn't yet decided to go to the cloud. If you're connected to the cloud, it's going to be better, because we can just ship more features and we can do it more quickly. And if you're entirely in the cloud, well, we would absolutely love that, and you are welcome. So.
I'm going to add to that, actually. So if you're purely on-prem, but you have every workload, or the majority of the workloads, and you want to get some of the functionality that it isn't in pure on-prem, you should really think about Cloud Connect or hybrid. And you got to remember, hybrid is a continuum, right? Hybrid starts with one site, one mailbox. So it's a journey. And yes, there's going to be licensing questions and configuration, but you do start to get immense functionality and immense benefits as soon as you get something in the cloud. And you connect your indexes, or there's small steps that give you a huge amount of return. And it's not that, okay, I need to migrate every mailbox and every site and every piece of data to the cloud. It's just I need to get some of it into the cloud. I need to become hybrid. So I think that there's a shift. I've seen that also from customers who are in the past have been like, okay, nothing in the cloud, to now like, oh yeah, I'm going to the cloud. I might not be all cloud though. So the hybrid model is much more interesting, and we generally cater and focus on cloud first, hybrid, on-prem, and there's different sets of features that go in each one of those, as Kamal was saying. Does that make sense?
I understand your comment. As a consultant, you see both sides, customers that don't go into the cloud at all,
yep,
and a lot of that do hybrid.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be lots of value for on-prem. There's actually sessions in here. They're not on our compliance list, but there are compliance features in that Exchange, I think Exchange 2016, SharePoint 2016 sessions, where our teams are building those features in those sessions for pure on-prem. As soon as, I think even in those sessions they show that as soon as it's hybrid or cloud connected or whatever we're calling it, tomorrow, you get even more, significantly more, and it doesn't require you to be all cloud. So it's actually 3 distinct states, and there's there's difference in value from all 3. So I want to make sure that everybody kind of keeps that in mind as you think through it, because in the past some of the conversations were, okay, I'm either in the cloud or I'm not. And nowadays, it's really, I can be all in the cloud, and there's a lot of value there, and it basically removes a bunch of burden from on-prem management and costs and things like that. Then there's this hybrid functionality, which gives me a lot of value while I'm still dealing with how do I get to pure cloud, if ever. And then there's the pure on-prem, where we're still delivering value for that, and we still love our customers. There's a continuum for that particular piece. Anyways.
Yep. Okay, well, most of the sessions, by the way, have like tables of these capabilities, sorry, even our compliance sessions, so definitely take a look at them. Kind of those listed up there.
One more question back there? All right.
Hi, yeah, I'm also coming from the SharePoint space, and truth be told, I know very little about compliance, but currently I'm consulting for Washington's largest employer who manufactures these big flying birds in the sky. I'm just wondering if you have any good stories to tell related to the aviation industry.
Sorry, we didn't catch that. Could you repeat that?
Oh, sure. I was just curious to know if you have any good stories to tell of experiences that you had with the aviation industry, let's say like the FAA.
Well, yeah. So typically aviation, a lot of manufacturing that might have government contract and very high specific manufacturing requirements. In a lot of ways, it's not different than banking or healthcare. It's still a highly regulated market, right? So what they're looking for, every large organization at this size is going hybrid, right? They're starting to place a segment, typically more of their, I'll pick on marketing, legal, functions that aren't engaged with the manufacturing and the engineering aspect of their business, the more sensitive pieces, because it's super easy to migrate those first. Right? Put certain business capabilities in the cloud that don't touch on the more sensitive areas. Legal departments are going to the cloud because we have a whole bunch of legal options already in the service that are helping them, and they get benefit in that hybrid solution, right? Even in their on-prem scope. What has really helped in the civilian market that carries government contracts is that even our multi-tenant environment is certified at 853 moderate. So they can still keep the data in the US. We have a bunch of features to help protect ITAR export data, for example. And that's both in the ITAR service, and even if you're in multi-tenant, there's additional requirements that you can take on as the customer to continue to protect that information. If you have trade secret information, it doesn't matter if you make airplanes or you're a pharmaceutical company. That trade secret information is just as sensitive in both scenarios. Different regulations, but we're recommending the same features. We're recommending the same mechanisms for those customers to protect that data and feel confident as they move to the cloud. The thing I think you'll be most challenged with, most organizations at that size have kind of a knee-jerk reaction in going to the cloud. So I won't pick on aviation, I'll pick on an Office of Legal Counsel in one of the states that I worked with. Their answer was they would just encrypt everything. Now their data retention requirement, 50 years. Their data sharing requirement, nationally. So my question to them was, do you roll your key annually? Because if you have a good key management process, you probably are, but you're going to retain your data for 50 years, and your requirements are to share it nationally. Have you really thought out the impact of your knee-jerk reaction and moving to the cloud and encrypting everything? These are the things that if you're in that consultant role, you really have to help them think through and work through. The solutions like that will not make sense for them long term, and they'll have to go back and withdraw from that kind of initial painful implementation and refactor that as something that's going to work better.
Okay, I think we're going to close. We've got maybe only 5 minutes left of the session, so we made good use of the time. I hope it was useful for everybody. If you still have any kind of questions, you've got our names from the start. Shobit here can, up front here, is our marketing contact for most of our areas, and he can reach into the right folks on the right teams as well. So feel free to share business cards, etc. I hope you've enjoyed Ignite. It's almost the end of the week, and you got your money's worth out of it. Thank you, everybody.